The time is 6:31. I hereby call the order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Sunderland Select Board. Would the Finance Committee and school committees like to call into order if either of you have quorum?
The elementary school committee has quorum, so I'll call us to order at 6:31.
Wonderful.
And I see the Finance Committee seems to have quorum, so I will call us to order at 6:31.
Perfect. We have quorum for everyone, and we are called to order. All right. Our first order of business is new business. Actually, we don't have minutes to approve this time. So when Franklin Tech, when you guys are ready, let us know, and we will get started with your presentation.
Sure. Mr. Martin is just trying to log in right now. He has the presentation. I just sent him the link, so I'm hoping he gets right in. We just ended us. I apologize. We were in Sunderland right until 6:30. So hopefully he'll go right in. But in the meantime, I'm Liz Bouchard. I'm the new business manager at Franklin Tech. Russ Cobras retired last year, so this was my first year in the role. If you don't recognize me from other meetings that I've attended. Let's see if he's in. And if he doesn't get in, I will jump in.
I'm in. I'm right here.
There he is. All right. So you're up, Rick.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I just.
All right. Could I share my screen? Okay. We'll do a two-part presentation. One is just to update everyone where we are in the process with the MSBA project, and the second part is given the town of Sunderland the assessments for their enrollment and their calculations for that as well. So we'll do a two-part. The first part we'll just go through the MSBA if that's acceptable to everybody. Okay. And that will include, okay, let's start right here. All right. I'm just going to kind of get to the meat and the potatoes. I recognize some faces that have seen this before. Basically, here's where we're currently at. And about 8, 9, even 10 years back, we started having our lighting system flicker on and off, and that's from the electrical switchgear. And if one of those go out, and we have about 18 of the electrical switchgear, if one of them go out, then we'll be without power for 2 months, and we'll close down school until we can have one rebuilt. To rebuild one of the electrical switchgear is between $100,000 and $150,000 each. So once one flickered, we decided to have one built. It was an old Federal Pacific. We had it built, and it got delivered on a Wednesday. And then Friday, the light flickered and didn't come back on. But the company came in 24 hours, we were back and running instead of a 2-month delay. So we went out and bought another one just in case another one goes. And sure enough, a couple of months later, once we had it delivered, the other one went. And so we got a third one. So we'll continue to pump hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last several years into the electrical mechanical switchgear system. And to replace that electrical mechanical system in our building would be what the cost estimated is, say, around $32 million. And when you do a big project like that, you're no longer grandfathered in to the sprinkler system. So you're going to have to pay $8 million to install that, but they won't do that unless you get your new roof. We're on the last coating of a 15-year roof coating. And in order to get a third one, you can't do it by law. You have to do a complete tear down and breakdown of your roof. So that would be estimated around 17 million. So we also had to relocate students with our sewage leakages on several different occasions. And we eventually found them over time, but sometimes students were out of entire hallways for about a week. So just to get our building maintaining its occupancy would be around $75 million. Um, and if we once you do those big structural costs, you have to get your building up to code, and to get it up to code would be $103 million. And unfortunately, all of this comes with no Massachusetts School Building Authority reimbursement. And what they're saying about the reimbursement is all of this would come with a 15-year bond, not in one shot, but maybe in several different shots. So you'd be paying, one 15-year bond, then another, then another. So next 45 to 60 years, there'll be these 15-year bonds. Depending on what we can do, like we may come in and they may say you can do this section for 15 years, but this one would overlap with the other 15-year bond because you can't put a 30-year bond into an old building. It wasn't that didn't make sense to the estimators. So if we were to look at $103 million to get our building up to code, there would be no money from the MSBA. When we look at where we're currently at, if we got MSBA funding, they would give us towns approximately $120 million, and that would be a 30-year bond. So the actual annual cost, believe it or not, would be lower than a 15-year bond at 100 million. And it's not the cost of these buildings nowadays, and I got to agree with the public with this one, are just astronomical. They have skyrocketed to an unacceptable level. I'm currently working with Senator Comerford to see what else can be done to try to help alleviate the cost, because they know that the facility, there is no zero cost option. So we got to figure out a way. When we look at the timeline of where we are in the project, we're looking at right around here when schematic design. We finished our feasibility and our eligibility portion of it. Once schematic design is done, it gets submitted to the MSBA. They review it. They either approve it or refine it. If everything goes according to what the MSBA, again, that's the Massachusetts School Building Association, then they'll be authorizing us to have a vote roughly in October of 2026, with a construction timeline going out to 2030-31. That's kind of where the time frame would be. As far as the site itself, we're currently in A. The building would be located in C. Once that building's completed, then this building will become the new baseball and soccer field. As far as how we arrived at the different options, these were some of the options that came our way. We looked at option 6 and option 8 as our two finalists because they were the least expensive of the other options. And these two options were within $500,000 of each other. We went with option 8 because, as you can see, it bumps out. Well, that was much safer for those who have been in our school. Our vocational shops are directly across our academic classrooms, so it's not unusual to be smelling collision repair fumes while you're in math class because you're only 15 feet away from that shop. Where here, all the shops would be located in the back and protected by a firewall. So that was a much safer, more educational friendly space. We got together with our architects, engineers, OPMs, school committee members, parents, teachers, and students to come up with all the different options that we're taking a look at here. Option 8A won out. Again, option 6 fitted as well, but because of the fumes and it all being in one building, we decided to go with option 8 here. And when I look at the footprint, that's what it would look like when it's done. Like I said, this would be a baseball and soccer field, and this would be the actual facility. I'm not going to get into the details here, but if questions come up, we have some things here. So the building itself, from an architectural standpoint, will represent the area in which we live. The brick front is resembling the mills that are in the area. The corners representing the industrial park, and the architect in the middle is Jess Bridge. What we should talk about here, which is really important, is that we're the only vocational school in the state that's actually in the last 25 years, or I was told like ever, is building a school that's smaller than our current population. And there's a reason for that. One, I am very sensitive to where we are in Franklin County with declining populations for student-based high schools. Some are steady, some are declining, but no one's going drastically up. We even reduced it this year by about 12 students. So we're not seeing the trend going up. We have approximately 650 students in our school. We're going to build the facility for 600. The MSBA came online when they did our enrollment trends, and they were prepared to authorize a 700-person building, but we had to push back on them because the difference between 600 and 700, when you go per student cost, it's $80 to $100 million in addition, and that was unacceptable for our towns. And we can do with a smaller school. We eliminated an assembly hall, so there'll be no assembly hall here because that's not reimbursable space. And so we restricted a lot of the space that's not reimbursable, which we found to be important. We can do with a gymnasium that we put some speakers in, and we can call that our assembly hall as well. And again, you don't want to build the Taj Mahal when you're out in Franklin County. You want, what do we need? We serviced the community well for the last 50 years. How do we do a good job the next 50 years? The buildings have skyrocketed. When we look at back in 2013, when the Greenfield building was built, it was 66 million. And here's all the other MSBA projects done around the same time. So they were at just above the average here. And if this line were to go all the way up, we're in this red dot. So we're actually below the current average. But that doesn't tell us anything. That doesn't make me happy because that current average is still $900 per square foot. And that's just the prices have gone astronomically high on these. When we look at the individual town breakdowns, and we look at the town of Sunderland, you're approximately 5.75% of the total project. When we break it down, and that's the most recent numbers we have, and I don't think they're going to fluctuate drastically from that. And are we serving our communities well? When we look at Franklin County Tech, the majority of our students are coming to our school and getting jobs in the field in which they're studying, contributing back to the tax base through the various companies you see all around Franklin County from our graduates. So we're proud of that. We're not, like we said in our last meeting, we're not the school to get kids guaranteed out to these four-year colleges. We believe Frontier does a wonderful job with that, and that's the right track. But we do service a certain population of kids that want to keep Franklin County Tech in the world of work, that's why we're number one in the state of all vocational schools, getting our kids out in the world of work. We average over 110 kids every year on paid co-ops. That's our mission, and we want to stay true to it. So that's a quick overview of the MSBA project. I do have Liz Bouchard, our new business manager here, who is quickly becoming our local expert in bonding or any other type of questions that I know I'm not going to be able to answer quite as well as her. So we are here to answer any of these questions before we move over to our school budget.
So my first question is just on how is the percentage share for the capital being done? Is that based on current enrollment? Is that based on long trends? Is that based on population of the towns?
For capital assessments, it is population and EQV, so 50%
Okay.
for each of those factors. So census every 10 years and EQV every 2 years is updated. So that's where that 5.75% comes from.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's why I have Liz.
And I'm by far not a bonding expert, but we're learning.
Crystal or Dan, any questions from the select board?
I was just gonna follow up. I know, I mean, Sunderland itself's got a real high percentage of renters, but that there's no factor for that in the formula is what you're telling us.
Did you say, is there a factor? Is that factored in?
Yeah, there's no, I mean, there's we have a lot of college students and such, and just asking the question. It sounds like it's not.
Well, the EQV, so the properties that, you know, the homeowners that are renting those properties out,
Okay.
that would be part of the EQV.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just quick question on that calculation. One of the sheets you had sent over had that breakdown and the two factors in the average. On that sheet for Sunderland was 5.95. Obviously, they're probably both right. One's just more updated. Which one is the more updated?
And maybe I wrote, Rick, it's actually on the chart here, or when we get into your capital assessments too in the budget, I could have just scratched that down to the side over here incorrectly.
Let's see. Let me find that one.
There you go, the blue. So 5.75.
So the sheet that came over with the budget that has the capital assessments, that's a little different. This is the one we should use?
Well, this was for a presentation, so maybe there was an issue with typing it in. So let's look at the capital assessment.
Actually, if you take a look, I think the figures on this slide are the population factor only. I'm looking and they all line up actually.
Okay, so that could have been.
They're not drastically different, but that.
But we'll look at your capital assessment chart in the budget.
Yeah, and we're in the schematic design, and they haven't even sent the schematic design to the MSBA for approval yet. So these numbers have fluctuated frequently over the last several weeks. And as they continue to get refined, not greatly, just like you said, but there's mild fluctuations as they begin to figure it out.
And now, when you were starting your presentation, you were saying it was going to be $100 million to renovate the original building. What is the estimated total cost for the new building?
It would be $238 million with the MSB reimbursing $125 million in that ballpark.
Okay.
So there is, but that's over a 30-year bond versus 15. And so the lesser cost is the $103 million, but it's not going to be less annually because that's only allowed 15-year bonds as opposed to a 30.
So minus the reimbursement, we're looking at 120 million-ish divided amongst the towns.
In that ballpark, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So at our 5.75 or 5.95 or whatever.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. So we're looking at about $7.5 million over the 30 years for Sunderland. And you'll probably cover that during your next chunk, so I'll
Go
wait
ahead,
till
Liz.
that part.
You're saying over the course of the entire bonding, $7.5 million?
About that, if that's
it's not, because unfortunately with interest it does turn into
right. Okay, so that would be just the principal then on that would be
right. So you're looking at almost double that, not double, but and we're working with our financial advisors. We had a meeting today. Now that our schematic design is being submitted this week and our budget numbers are firm, we're working with the financial advisors to really get these figures projected out. So we should have those in March.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So when we first did these figures, we were looking at a $250 million project. And the costs have gone down. We cut out a lot of gross square footage. So we were able to bring it down to a smaller number after the estimators and through the schematic design.
Okay.
And that's exactly why we didn't go with a 700-person school, which would have brought it up another 80 million. That just didn't make any sense.
Okay. So just rough, very, very, very rough math. If we're looking at about 15 million over 30 years, we're looking at about $500,000 per year for Sunderland's part of the bond.
Yeah, it was about like 490 with the figures the way they stood back when we were projecting out $250 million project. So they will go down. But that was the high amount. Once we really went into the short-term borrowing, it was about $490,000 for Sunderland.
Okay. That's the number I'm looking for, is trying to get an idea of what we've been looking at adding to our capital, capital needs for a town. Just for context, that is a little bit more than what we have in our capital stabilization as it currently stands yearly for the whole town. So, Thank
So,
you. Go ahead.
yeah, so what interest rate for that 30-year bond, what interest are we looking at right now? Because that's a big factor in 30 years. And the
Right.
interest rates are fluctuating. So what is it looking like right now? What's that rate?
We're hoping around 4%.
Okay, that's a good rate actually.
Average
So
3.75 and 4, so average about 4%. But we'll try to get as close to state qualified bonds as we can. It's a large figure. So for Franklin Tech to take that on under a state qualified bonds may be a little bit complicated. Whether or not we can get our larger towns, we have 3, Montague, Orange, and Greenfield.
yeah.
If they could take out their own bonds, that may help us get. So there's some different scenarios that we could do. We're working with our financial advisors to try to get the best option possible.
Right. So Liz, you read my mind because I was going to ask you about municipal bonds. And then also, I mean, you guys are great. Liz and Russ, I mean, the tech does so much for our community. It's rated so high in the state, like you said, #1. But with those 3 big towns, and then you have 21 other towns that are submitting. But how is this going to work in terms of if 2 or 3 towns can't afford it? How have we talked about that a little bit?
We have.
Yeah.
So our district agreement, pretty much the vote is a majority vote.
Right.
So a single town can't veto the vote.
Right.
So how they handle, and I know it's a huge ask, it's a huge dollar amount. But each town individually will have to handle funding the project.
Right. And that's the part that for me is a little hard to understand. I can understand Sunderland, but I mean, majority vote based on towns or by number of people?
By voters.
Yeah.
By
So
voters.
for example, if 5,000 people come out to vote.
Right.
And 2,501 vote for the project, then it's a go. If 2,501 vote against it, then it's not a go.
But the votes are in every single town, right?
It's a 13-hour vote. It will happen on the same day during the same hours for all 19 member towns according to our regional agreement.
Okay.
And that will, in the end, be all added up together in one big pool of one big pot, and they're going to go by the majority vote.
Total. So it doesn't matter if 8 of the smaller towns vote it down. If the bigger towns have the bigger population and vote for it, it's still going to pass. It's majority of total voters for that day from all the towns.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, good. And when will we know about the municipal bonds from those 3 bigger towns?
So it's still really preliminary. Like I said, our schematic design is getting submitted on Thursday. So I met with Unibank today, now that we have our budget in place and that all written out on the MSBA forms. So I had a meeting with them today. We have another one March 9th. So they're going to look into all avenues. And I don't know if we present to Greenfield, Montague, and Orange, if they would be open to that. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's presenting this information and the figures that come with the entire project. So we haven't even brought that to their attention yet.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then I'm just looking at the project. If you were going to break ground, when's the day that you would break ground? What's the hope?
2028, early 2028. The milestone for completion is to move in 2030 and close out 2031. So the decommissioning of the building.
So if interest rates continue to slip down a little bit, could we possibly look at that 30-year bond in a year from now could be 0.5% lower? Or when do you have to commit on the 30-year bond?
I'm not 100% sure because we're going to try to delay.
Yeah.
We're going to keep our cash flows. So we're going to submit our cash flows to them with the project manager this week at the end of the week so that they can try to determine the best scenario. And again, I'm no expert in bonding, but working with the 3 financial advisors at Unibank, they'll really try to guide this to get the best package for our towns.
Of course. And then in terms of, and I forget the acronym, MSBA, or the Massachusetts Building Fund, when will we know for sure what they'll commit to? You said 125 million, possibly, but when we know for sure?
Right now, we're looking at 112 million for their reimbursement. They will vote, as all goes well, they will approve our schematic design in April.
Okay.
And that would
So
be
you'll
close
see on the
to
timeline here,
120
the April
million.
MSBA approval. So the schematic
Yeah.
design was submitted this week, and we hope, and then we're locked into that budget.
And
And that's
how,
with escalated costs because obviously construction won't begin in 2026.
right. And I went to a workshop on this way back when in school committee stuff, but how do they determine what percent? I always thought they paid at least 50%, but there doesn't seem they're doing that.
So
So
we're
what
at,
did,
oh,
oh,
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Rich, if you want.
Yeah, we get overall, it gets confusing because they like to throw out higher numbers than what you
Yep.
actually get. So we qualified for just over 66%.
what I
However,
thought.
that's not the reimbursement.
Mm,
Calculate the soft cost, like the reason why we're not doing the assembly hall. None of that gets reimbursed.
mhm.
So we were trying to scale the project down to what's reimbursed by the MSBA and what isn't. Your offices and hallways and those kind of things are not
Excavation.
reimbursed.
Right.
When you tear down the old building, that's not reimbursed. So the actual total reimbursement is around 50%,
Okay.
not the 66 that some people like to put out there. I just like to give you the real number.
Right. But 50% would be 120,
Right.
but they're saying 112 right now.
It will end up because we haven't submitted the schematic design yet.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it'll
we're looking
end
at
up
like
being-
124 and 112 split right now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
district share at 124. I mean, there's a small range, but that's
Yeah.
about what we're looking at.
All right. Thank you. That was a lot of questions. You guys answered them well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking.
No problem.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else have questions on this part of the presentation?
So the estimate for, for the building and all that, that does include the building demolition of the existing building and all the field work?
Yes,
Creating the fields, the landscaping, the whatever drainage.
correct. That's all of the site cost. That's all of the soft costs associated with it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I move on to the budget for the town? Okay, let me see if I can get that up.
That should be the easy one, right?
Well, it's everyone's struggling, so it's I'm not sure the next several years is gonna be easy for anyone, but that's I guess easier because we've been doing it for longer. With this MSBA stuff is all brand new to everybody. So I'm going to just walk you through our budget book, and the reason why you do not have a copy is because our school committee doesn't vote on it until March 12th. So what you're getting is what we presented to our school committee in our February school committee meeting called the first reading, the public meeting. And then they have 1 month to deliberate and they vote on the final budget in March. So I'm going to take you through it. Now, when we're done with this, we will send out this electronic booklet which will explain every item that's here through a clickable link, including a nice friendly table of contents and all that stuff. So everything electronically is the best way to use this book. Let's start with the assessment to the towns. And when I look at the town, whoops, I highlighted Deerfield, but not Sunderland. Okay, we just got done with the Deerfield meeting. That's why. There's my excuse. All right, so the Sunderland, let me get that up. Right down in here. So you've been consistent with 9 students. And I've never seen a trend like that, for 4 consecutive years. So your assessment isn't going to fluctuate drastically. Your per pupil expenditures are 19,614. And that's handed to us. That's not something we create. So that will and you were a little lower last year. So you see your assessment went up a little bit, like $7,000 from the previous year. Our average for all 19 member towns is 13,640, with the high being around 20,000 for several towns. And so you guys are at the higher end of what the state deems the per pupil expenditures and the minimum contributions. So when we look at debt service is our old windows and doors project and how much that costs per town's right here. So we look at Sunderland. And 12,260, that fluctuates maybe $50 or a couple $100 every few years when they recalculate the EQV. So that's not going to go up. There's probably, about 8 years left on that before that's paid. But that's the old windows, doors, and roof project and paving. When I go back to the sources of funding, you just click all these stuff. If you wanted more information about any of this, you just click. And if I click debt service, it will tell you a whole paragraph of what it is and any other external links or what it does about the budget line item and all that. So I'm not going to get that detailed tonight. Once the budget book is voted on, it will explain all that in complete detail. Chapter 70, we're well familiar with this. We're in hold harmless. We dropped from in District 591 to 579. So we got that hold harmless money, which is just a nice little pat in the head, saying nice job, but we didn't get any real funding to help support even the cost of living. How we get that money, that 6248, is important to be transparent. So all of our budget numbers you can find anywhere. So that 6248, if I go to the cherry sheet, if I click here, and if I go to the external link down here at the Department of Revenue, and you could do this for Frontier, for any school district, you just scroll down, you find the town, Franklin County Tech, you press submit. So that number I just gave you, the 6248 is right here. So that's where you find your chapter 70. You'll also see our regional transportation right here. And that's gone up a little bit, but as you'll see in a minute, not enough to offset the operating cost. So we go back here. And so chapter 70 is trending all over the place. But if you notice way back, in those good old days when they would give you chapter 70 based on Student Opportunity Act, it would go up about $500,000. Now it doesn't. So it's struggling. That state aid transportation, I said right here, we got 959. I'm going to scroll down to how it's used. That's 959 out of almost 1.3 million. So who's paying for the other part of that? That's coming from our towns. And that's really not fair since Franklin County Tech is the largest geographical school system in the entire state by far, with 561 square miles of territory. The next closest one's Mohawk at 220,000. After that, there's very few, even over 100,000 miles. So we have to pay for all of those transportation routes. And that's still going to cost us $400,000 out of our operating budget. I just showed you the cherry sheet where that's coming from. Out of district costs to students who pay, up to 27,000 if they have special education per student. Health to offset our budget. We have a specialized program where we now can pay $100,000 towards our budget. Our excess and deficiency dropped for about 120,000. And this is an important part too, because you can put any number here if you're doing your budget for schools, and everything we need to be transparent on. See, that 53374, you should be able to find it with the state certification. You just click down here, you scroll down to your school, Franklin County Tech's right there. I'm just going to preview it.
Hey, Rick, just so you know, when you go to an external link from your thing, it doesn't show up on the share.
Oh,
So
it doesn't.
we're
Okay,
not seeing
so
those just when you're in your thing.
all
So
right, so I'll avoid the extra. Thank you for that.
not a huge deal, just letting you know that we don't actually
Yeah.
see what you're doing.
So but basically, just believe it, and when I send you the budget, you'll see the same numbers. How's that?
There we go.
So that's our excess and deficiency. So Liz is going to take us through how we spend our money and the reductions in force we needed to be able to balance a budget this year, because as you are all well aware of the astronomical insurance cost over the last year, with a 20% increase, then another 20% increase, and now we budgeted for a third 20% increase. You can't recoup $1.2 million out of a budget. And we thinned our budget out about 700,000 before we even started to make reductions in force. And that means that some of the items you saw, we use much more of our non-member town. We didn't use a lot of our capital stabilization. We've reduced that by almost 200,000. We had our instructional services reduced 200,000. Our E&D is down about 120. So there was a lot of line items in here that we couldn't possibly make up for all the cost of the insurance. But I'm going to let Liz give you all that kind of news. So go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I'll try to fill in some of the gaps. So district leadership, we had a 28-year retirement. Our business manager retired. So there was a slight savings in that line. Instructional services, Mr. Martin touched on the reduction in force of positions based on the insurance costs. Student
And
services.
that was about a
small
half a dozen. That was about a half a dozen positions that we had to have a reduction in force or eliminate. And we had to do a balanced budget. So that's all based on insurance. All right, go ahead.
All of it. Student services, there was a slight decrease in that line that covers our student athletics and extracurriculars and all student-related activities and medical services. Pupil transportation, there's an increase. We have a 2.5% escalation on our transportation contract that we're in year 2 of 5. Our retirement, our plant operations is pretty flat. We were able to cut out a paving repair line in the budget as we performed those services this year. Retirement contributions, we saw a $100,000 increase in our Greenfield retirement contribution for our support staff this year, as well as we had associated separation costs. So that line went up considerably. Insurance, we touched on that. We had numerous increases. We will be voting this Wednesday on the premium increases for FY27. They're looking at upwards of 16% for this year. So a big hit to our budget and why we had to make those reductions. Other non-employee insurance, that's our property and liability coverage. There has been some increases in those lines. We don't have our exact figures yet, but these are based on projections working with our carrier. And we have a new aviation hangar as well to insure. Our land lease for our hangar, that is for our new grant-funded aviation hangar for our aviation mechanic technician program. That is on the Turners Falls Municipal Airport property. So we have a small lease amount that we pay to them annually. Transfer to capital stabilization, we decreased that line hugely this year to help with the budget gaps. So we're only funding that at $50,000 this year. Debt service is our windows and doors, the bonding that you see above and the revenues. So that is 206, just a slight decrease from last year. Our school choice tuition is funding 2 projected students that may attend Montee Tech for a program that Franklin Tech does not offer. And our transfer to OPEB, we have about a $15 million liability for other post-employment benefits. We are trying to make a small attempt to cover that liability. But we brought the number down by 20,000 over last year to help close the gap in our budget.
Do we have any questions regarding the budget? I mean, I can go through a bunch of charts and all that kind of stuff, but I'll let you have the fun when we finally get it approved. And then when you can't sleep at night, you get to scroll through it.
Hi, Rick, I got a question for you. I'm confused. Maybe it's obvious, but how can one town per student be 20,000, another town be 13 at the same facility?
So that's based on
The
state's wonderful formula where they do
Right.
their individual towns' relative income, relative property wealth that they then reassess every year, and the ability to pay, and they recalculate it to ridiculous amounts because no one's going to sit here and tell me, and I haven't been, I in my first 18 years I spent in the eastern part of the state. So, but no one's going to tell me that the town of Sunderland or Deerfield is as expensive as Wellesley, Wayland, Dover, Sherburne, Lexington, Concord, the most expensive towns in the entire country. yet they get the $20,000 per pupil as well. How is that fair? Right? So
Right.
it is a formula that is in need of revision. I know that they are working on it. I've been told they're about 2 years out before they start changing that.
Right,
But
right. No, I
it
know
is
that.
crazy.
But I just said in our little county, I just it's
Yeah.
crazy that Sunderland's 19 and maybe Rowe or someone's 13 or 12. And
Yep.
I know that, and maybe if Darius or Shelley are there, I think Frontier is the cost to educate a kid is about 25.
Right. But we had it went up a little bit this year for us. We were an average of like 12,400 the previous year. Now we're like 13,000 and change.
Right.
Um, as enrollment declines, these costs tend to go up. So we should
Right.
be, if all things were equal, we should be 1.5 times higher than the local comprehensive school district based on the Department of Ed's formula, because it
Hmm.
costs 1.5 times more to educate someone at a vocational school based on the equipment and all of
Yes.
that stuff. So, but we're not, because we had increased enrollment. We no longer had that. We do enrollment projections that will definitely say that we're not heading in that direction when we look at, here's my big chart here, we go. This is going to 2033, 34, and the blue is the total catchment area of eighth graders. So we're down to 525. And we expect that if we take the same percentage of students, we would be around 158. We currently are bringing in 170, but through a graduation, what happened, that number gets lower and lower. So the enrollment trends aren't going up, but they're going down in the next 8 to 10 years at the high school age. Now, I do understand the elementary age is actually slightly up. So well, where do I get these numbers? We find them in the school attending children report. Now, this is that external link that I shouldn't have clicked because now I remember you can't see it. That shows every individual town who's in pre-K, K, all the way to grade 12. So we extrapolate that out so we can get an enrollment projection. And we're pretty close on that because that's actually the people who are in the seats. That's the actual number of students. But it is absolutely mind-boggling how the state assessment of the wealth of the towns is relative, um, you know, to the economy. We had a town like Heath or Heath Aladdin that was at $19,000. 1 millionaire moved out. They're down to $11,000. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just
No, I don't.
that's how
I know the
that
formula.
highlights how ridiculous
I
it
hear you.
is.
I
Yeah,
hear it is crazy. Well, no, I think you. Thank you. I just all the kids who go to tech are getting the same education. Just funny how the evaluation of the funds is different.
yeah, yeah.
If it was a private school, they'd all pay the same tuition.
Right.
Each town has a different calculation based on the state, and that formula has been around a long time too. That's the problem. Anyways, I thanks for answering that. Thanks for what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you guys mind explaining how school choice works from Franklin Tech out to the other
Sure.
schools?
Well, Franklin County Tech doesn't have school choice because it didn't make any sense. Every year we have to vote on that. But how it works, why we have to budget for it is case, say one of our member towns like Orange or New Salem have a student that actually qualifies to get into Monty Tech, which is probably physically as close as Franklin County Tech. Um, but they're going for a program or a shop that we don't offer. By law, they have the right for that education, and then we have to pay the school choice bill. We don't actually lose out because we still get the Chapter 70 money from that student. That's just how crazy the formula is. So we pay 6,000, they'll give us 10,700. So the difference is we make out $4,700 for a kid that doesn't even go to our school. So that only happens one or two, maybe up to three times in any given year, which a student then from one of the closest towns to Monty Tech will actually choose a program that we don't offer. That's the same thing that we had in Sunderland. I remember a decade, probably 12 or 13 years ago, I was a principal, And I was at the Sunderland Town Hall, and they were concerned about 3 students going over to Smith Vocational School at an astronomical price because you had to pay the tuition plus the transportation. So that dollar today for Smith Voc is around $65,000 when you calculate their tuition plus the transportation. So this is why I started the animal science program, to help our towns out, not to get stuck with some of those 60, 70, $80,000 bills to go to a school for something that we could offer right here for the $19,000, which includes transportation. So these are the small moves that we did over the last, 10 or 15 years.
And what is the relative acceptance rate of students who apply to tech? Given the downward enrollment trends, are you accepting a larger percentage of students who apply at this point, or is it
No,
still similar?
it's probably limited and even smaller, because we are at a situation where we are required by new DESC guidelines to do a lottery. And what the lottery does is it disempowers students and families that have come here for generations that want to come here, and they start to turn their grades around and their behaviors, and and they may or may not get selected by a pure lottery. So the lottery is something that was originally designed for those vocational schools that kept taking all the college-bound kids, and having waiting lists of 400 or 500. Well, we're not that school. By the time we're all done at the end of this year, we may have a dozen kids, maybe up to 25 at the most or less, that would be on any type of a waiting list once we're done. So we project our enrollment was 591 last year, for in-district, and 579 this year. Our out-of-district went from 653 to 643 or something like that. So we don't project our numbers going up. They might steady out. They might tick up a little bit here and there. It all depends on how many students would be interested in some of our newer programs like our aviation, that we got totally 100% funded through grants.
Crystal, Dan, anything else from the select board on this?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Anything else from finance committee?
I have one quick question on the insurance costs. As mentioned, 20% increases multiple times in a year. I just wanted to understand, when I looked at that budget when it was pulled up, the increases were a little bit different. It was like 5%, then 15%, now 40%. I'm guessing that just has to do with like the timing of when these things land. But Liz or Rick, could you just lay out big picture, like the disconnect between the budget increases and a smoother, large increase in the insurance costs?
So when we voted our budget last year, we were not aware of we budgeted for 8% on an insurance increase. So the number that you see that was approved last year, we had to then this year move money to fund the increase that we weren't aware of. So that's why the numbers don't exactly trend the way the percentage increases did.
Okay, thanks. That's what I figured. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, because we had to fund that deficit for the unknown insurance increase. So that October one really hurt.
Great. Anything else from finance committee? Anything from school committee? Wonderful. I think that is all of our questions.
Thank you all very much.
We appreciate your time. We appreciate how hard of a job it is to do this, and the math never works. So we know that. We appreciate that. So thank you again for everything you do for our students, for our towns, for our communities. And we will talk to you soon.
Likewise. Have a good night.
Likewise.
Alrighty. Up next, I believe we have, are we doing Frontier next, Becky? No, we're doing elementary next. Sorry. All right. Darius, Ben, Shelley, you guys are up.
Great, thank you. I'm Darius Modesto, for those who don't know me. I'm the superintendent of schools. And I have Shelley Pareda with me, our head of business and financing at schools. Shelley's going to take you through the elementary school budget. It's a warning. We sent out some information ahead of time. It's an ugly budget. And there's a lot of factors that got there. So Shelley's going to walk you through how we got to such an ugly budget and kind of having to work with the town about how we're going to move forward with it. So, tonight will be really about getting all that information out there so you can see what is going on with the budget and again, how we got there. So Shelley, if you could take it away.
All right. Can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so you're going to hear some similar stories, particularly when we talk about health insurance, we talk about wage increases. So similar theme, I think, budget to budget. As Tech presents, you hear Sunderland and then you hear Frontier. There are going to be some repeats here. But I'm primarily going to focus on walking you through where the increases come into play. As we go through the budget process, we'll share line by line item budgets with you. But right now, we're really just talking about where our increases are being driven from. So we always present our level service budget going into each new fiscal year. So we replicate our programs from the prior year, move them forward. So all of our staffing and all of our student services replicated from 2026 into 2027. And this year tends to be particularly challenging. Usually it's wage increases from the contract we're talking about, but we are seeing some other increases that took place in 2026 that is sort of changing what our level service looks like. So I'm going to start by talking about 2026 changes. So like Franklin Tech, Frontier Regional is part of Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust. There was an October 1st health insurance increase of 20% on our insurance premiums. That was unbudgeted in the 2026 budget. So we are having to make up for that in the 2027 budget. Sunderland Elementary School only covers their portion of the central office health insurance. The town covers all health insurance for town employees. So when I'm referring to increases to benefits and insurance, it's only related to central office. However, that 20% unbudgeted in the current year needs to be factored into the new year because it is now part of our level service budget. We also had some student resident changes as far as requirements for IEP needs, which we are mandated to cover student needs based on their IEPs. We had some new students move into district, and then we've had some changes with our out-of-district costs in the current year. The current one-to-one requirements, Ben has done a great job with the staff on the ground and the special education department to cover student needs with the existing staff. But you're going to see, I'm going to talk about later, moving forward for long-term trajectory, that really isn't feasible. We need to make sure that students' needs are being met moving forward. Out-of-district costs are a big one. This is something that we did not plan for, to have new out-of-districts in the current year. Sunderland does have one student who we pay to go out-of-district currently. It's part of our budget. It's already in there. However, this piece of the conversation is twofold as we look ahead to next year. That existing students program is increasing, their transportation costs are increasing, and we have a new out-of-district placement. Special education changes are really part of the driver of our increased budget growth in the new year. And just so everyone knows, in the current year, those unexpected out-of-district costs, we are using supplemental funding. So Sunderland Elementary did receive rural aid in the current year. We're going to have to dip into that fund. Typically, we save that for the next year to help reduce our budget. We're not going to have that option because of this out-of-district cost. And we have some circuit breaker relief that we received this year for last year's out-of-district claim. We are going to have to use that to help fund these increased transportation and increased out-of-district costs. From there, I want to talk about wages. So you can see on each side of these slides, we have our non-union personnel. We have placeholders in for all of those staff. So that is anyone boots on the ground who's not in a union contract. So secretary, principal, cafeteria, custodial, as well as administrative contracts. So the principal, the vice principal, central office staff, anyone in the superintendent's office, anyone else that's a shared split is included on the left hand of that slide. And then on the right hand of this slide, you can see where the primary growth in wages is coming from the union contract. Next year will be year 2 of our union contract, which is it's a healthy contract. We settled probably maybe a little bit higher than Darius and I were comfortable with, but we were able to come up with some great growth for our staff for Unit A and Unit C. Unit C is our instructional assistants, if anyone's not familiar with that word, paraprofessionals. Unit A is anyone on the teacher contract. So on this slide, I gave you the breakdown of what the COLA is, depending on where someone is on their salary schedule. Top step is getting 4. There's a 3.22% built in for all of the other steps plus a 3% COLA. And then column advancement does have a big impact on our wage growth. If we have employees, teachers specifically, who have taken additional postgraduate degrees or credits, and they're going to have column movement, that changes what their step increase and their COLA increase looks like. So we have 4 faculty in Sunderland who will be receiving 6 to 9% wage increases depending on where they fall in the salary schedule. There was minimal growth in Unit C at the level service budget, and that's just because of how IAs are funded in various pots of money. Not all of our IAs are funded from the general fund, and when I am talking about our numbers right now, we're referring to general fund, not our revolving funds. Non-wage expenses are also pretty hefty this year. So student services relates to any type of transportation and also our health department, so the nurse office here. The primary growth factor here is related to transportation increases, which is twofold. The regular transportation contract is not increasing. However, in the current year, we use $65,000 of rural aid to help offset that expenditure. We're unable to do that moving forward because we're going to use the rural aid money in the current year to pay for the increase out of district costs. And then we are seeing growth in special education transportation next year, 1 for the existing out-of-district student, and then 2 for the new out-of-district student. Those expenditures have to be added back in. Benefits and insurance, this is where that central office health insurance comes into play. So there is a 40% increase benchmarked into the budget. It's that 20% from October 1st, and then a 20% placeholder for fiscal year 27. Which may come down slightly. The trust is going to be voting in the next couple of weeks on health insurance rates. So we may see some relief here, but I don't anticipate it will be significant. And then you can see the $215,000 increase cost for out of district. This is not our total out of district cost. This is just the increase in the new year. We have out of district costs above this as well, about another $70,000. So that is our non-wage expenditures. And then the next slide, I'm going to tell you what that exactly works out to be. So we're looking at, for a level service budget, 15.95% or $573,000 roughly for fiscal year 27. And you can see the breakdown here, non-wage versus wage increases. Any questions before I keep going? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on. So the next step of our budget process after we've looked at level services and all of our funding sources is to see what new requests are needed based on the principal's conversations within the district, as well as looking at student demographics and making sure all of the needs can be met. As I mentioned earlier, we have new one-to-one IEP needs in the current year that we are covering with existing staff. However, it is putting some hardship on the community. We're making it work, but in an ideal world, and this is what we present in our first round of budget, is if we could have all of the appropriate staffing that we need. We include those in here as a principal request. So there is a request for 2 new instructional assistant positions. And then you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, minor adjustments to primarily supply accounts to account for inflation and increased cost of materials. And then we have a lot of deferred maintenance in the Sunderland Elementary School building. We've been trying to tackle that slowly over the years. And just because of the cost of contractors, we're looking for an increase there as well. And then you see another 5,000 for special education contracted services. So those are outside providers that come into the building to meet students' needs based on their individual educational plan requirements. So their IEPs have specific needs in them that maybe we don't have the staffing for on the ground. So we always have contracted services for special education coming into the building. So we're looking for a little bit of growth there. Total of $85,000, which adds 2.37% to our budget, which is where we're getting our total cost to educate. You can see on the bottom here in this bottom row, total budget of 4.2 million or 18.31%, 660,000 roughly over the prior year. Sunderland Elementary School does use revolving funds and grants to help fully fund its budget. So this is an additional $600,000 of funding outside of the general fund that the school uses to help cover primarily positions. This is mostly staff related, and the growth from 26 to 27 in each of these categories is only accounting for COLA increase based on the contract. You can see down the bottom here, the circuit breaker and the rural aid. We are not planning to use any money in fiscal year 27. I'm going to talk about circuit breaker a little bit further. You can see the 65,000 that we used in rural aid in the current year that we're not going to have in fiscal year 27 due to the increase out of district costs. So we're actually seeing a little bit of a decrease in our total revolving fund usage. So adding that all up, total funds, so our general fund budget in the top row, that 4.25 million, revolving funds and grants of 600,000, and then our total budget about $4.8 million. Breaking that down per student, which does include our resident and school choice, we're sort of flat in Sunderland, which is unfortunate that we're not going to get out of that hold harmless state because that would help the town receive additional Chapter 70 funding. You won't see more than the $75 per pupil that the governor has in the current budget unless it's increased as we go through the budget process with the state. But our total cost with the 175 students is about $27,000. And the last couple slides I have are really sort of informational things that we've talked about at school committee level. So continuing the planning process, this was the next step in the budget discussion, was meeting with you all, Select Board, Finance Committee, and School Committee together. We're hoping to get some direction out of this meeting potentially as to where this budget can go, because we do recognize that it is a significant ask. So with that said, school committee did talk, this top box here on the top that talks about budget reductions. School committee did talk about what some of those pieces would look like. We did not get into great detail because we wanted to go through this process with you all first, but ultimately what it would come down to if we needed to reduce this budget would be looking at personnel. It's the primary factor of our budget. About 70 to 75% of our budget comes from wages, which is directly to educate the students in the school. So we would be looking at cutting positions. We're talking internally, is there any way to consolidate classrooms? Kindergarten is always a spot where we look at that every year because we sort of fall on that cusp of we really only need one class, but Sunderland is a more transient community than some of the neighboring districts, and we inevitably see students move in over the summer and that ends up tipping the scale. So that's always part of our conversation. We're also looking at enrollment numbers in the other grade levels to see if there's anywhere else we can consolidate. And then, of course, we would consider other funding sources. There are not any other funds available in Sunderland. I'm going to get into that a little bit more on the next slide. The other piece that we've talked about is a budget freeze for the current year, which is a little bit challenging. We've done this in the past, primarily during COVID. We froze the budget to try to save money for, I believe it was fiscal year 2021, because we didn't know what revenues were going to look like coming in from the state. Right now, that's a little hard for us because we do have increased insurance costs that we're covering in the current year, and then we have an increase out of district costs. So we maybe could recoup 1%, which is helpful. It's about $35,000, but it's not going to save this budget given the 18.31% increase. Bottom of this slide just shows you next meeting. So right now, the public hearing is scheduled for March 10th at 6 o'clock. School committee would vote to adopt the budget on March 26th, and then annual town meeting, I believe, is April 24th at 6:30. And the next slide just gives you some more information about our other revolving funds. So a little bit more details on rural aid and circuit breaker. So as I said, we will not have rural aid available to help offset the next year. If our out of district costs end up slightly less than what the special education department is currently estimating, maybe we could recoup about $20,000. We could throw that money into school choice for future use, which is a good thing for us to do because our school choice expenses are exceeding our revenue. As we continue to shrink, our opportunities to add new school choice students and bring in more school choice revenue is also shrinking. And then circuit breaker. So circuit breaker is reimbursement for special education costs, primarily out of district costs, above a certain threshold. So the current threshold is around $55,000, or foundation enrollment amount is about $55,000. Once you surpass that, and it's by student, not as a total, once you surpass that, you can submit for circuit breaker reimbursement up to 70% of anything over that. Given what we know right now about the enrollment of this new student who is going out of district, we will not meet that threshold, so we won't exceed that $55,000 cap, which means we will not see circuit breaker relief in fiscal year 27 to help us out. There is something called extraordinary relief that comes into play in situations just like ours, where it's an unexpected out of district and special education costs. We're estimating right now that we could see about $10,000. The challenge with extraordinary relief is that you have to use it in the current year because that's when your new expense is. So that can't be saved for fiscal year 27 either. I would estimate in 28 we'll see about $70,000, so we'll get some relief. But when you're looking at the grand scheme of, in the current year, we're looking at $215,000 on this budget, and another year that could be $230,000. So 70,000 is just, really a drop in the bucket. And then when it comes to revolving funds, early childhood revolving continues to be a concern. We have more and more needs in our community for financial support, which is excellent. However, it also puts a strain on how we cover all of our staffing in those programs. So last year we had a deficit. We actually had to do an end of year transfer from school choice to cover the early childhood revolving balance. That could potentially happen again this year. So it's just on our radar as something we continue to talk about, and also another revolving pot of money that we can't dip into. School choice, I just explained that. Revenue, there's not a huge opportunity for growth there in our school choice numbers, which means the expenses that we have on school choice, we have to continue to try to fund with less money coming in. And also just a note I threw on here, we have a sick buyback next year. Those of you that have been on the committees for a couple of years know that Sunderland Elementary has submitted on a separate warrant article for the town to cover, I think mostly out of free cash, possibly out of ARPA a couple of years back, to cover that contractual sick buyback. It's minimal in 27, so we're not going to be putting in a request for an additional warrant increase there. It's about $10,000. We're going to try to cover that when it comes up. It's a mid-year retiree, so we don't have to pay this out until next January or February. I think at that point, our hope would be that we have rural aid that's increased, not decreased, like it did in the current year, and we could pay that ourselves out of that additional fund rather than asking the town for another $10,000 on top of a really steep budget year. So a lot of information, and I know I talked really quickly, so I'm happy to back up slides, answer questions. Darius, Ben, Jessica, anyone else on the committee, please jump in and help me out if I missed anything. I want to come back to here.
All right, Dan and Crystal, do you have any questions for them about the elementary school budget?
Boy, it's a lot. I just can you just explain to me the early childhood revolving? What is that exactly?
So the state allows us to, because we charge for preschool tuition for anyone who's not receiving special education services. So we don't have universally free preschool in Sunderland. If we had universally free preschool, we wouldn't charge, but we do charge families. We cannot charge for students who need special education services, at least not on the days that they're there receiving services based on their IEPs. But other families pay tuition to attend preschool at Sunderland Elementary. So that money is in a revolving fund that we can use year to year to help pay for. It primarily pays for staffing. There's some minor expenditures in there for non-wage expenses, but it's really to help support the staff in that program so that the general fund budget doesn't have to cover all of the staffing. We could never fully fund that ourselves within the budget if we didn't have another funding source.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Crystal, any questions? All right,
No,
Finance Committee. Oh,
I'm
sorry.
just trying to take in all the numbers and
Yeah.
So
All of us are.
if I could jump in, so I just want to kind of highlight a few things. So, well, it says 18%. What we don't know is we're kind of, and I know they purposely set this up, but we're blind to, well, not completely blind. We can start looking at cherry sheets and stuff, but where the number is, where the town needs us to come in at, without decimating the school with cuts. And so, and when we talk about a lot of this growth, it's a kind of a perfect storm of not getting rural aid. We're having to use the rural aid and not having it decrease by 25%. And I want people to understand the special ed component here. It is absolutely the perfect storm of, I can't believe statistically it's even possible. But we started off the year where we had 2 students arrive that required one-on-ones in their IEP. So once it's written in an IEP that a student needs a one-to-one service, you have to follow it. It's the law. So Ben had to shift people around within our current budget. We then received 2 more students with one-to-one IAs, and one was a shift and something, but that detail doesn't matter. And then the final one is we received a student who needs an out-of-district placement at the tune of 120,000 or 140,000, not including transportation. This is unheard of. Usually in a school this size, you get 1 a year. A couple of years ago, we had 2 that had to come to Whately in the same year, and it screwed up that budget. This is unheard of kind of thing. So if we have to make reductions, we still have to, by law, meet those students' needs. And so that's kind of where we're kind of like on the shift of this budget. There is no real, we know that we may have to reduce this, that the 18% or that total number may have to come down, but we're kind of we're blind to where it comes down to. And then those of you who read the paperwork, Frontiers assessment came in high for the town of Sunderland. And that basically is that's the state's, the formula to figure out what your town wealth is based on, the number of factors they use in there as well. So you put those 2 numbers together, and I know the town can't afford that without doing something drastic like an override or that kind of thing. And even then it might be too much. So I guess really, and we understand that coming in here, where we're not fools in that area. We understand clearly what we're asking is too much, but we are looking for guidance on what to do, to bring that number down to. And you guys are first in the ticket for town meeting, so the timeline is really short. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at here. So we did put it all in. We did not do the hard work of starting to do reductions. There are some things where we can drop those percentage points, but getting below double digits, I don't see how we do that without a double digit percentage wise, rather. I don't see how we do that without major cuts. Include, and then you got concerns about if you lose some of those services, will people, choice out or that kind of thing. So if there's that concern where you want to try to not create that reverse flow. So now that I said all that, is there any questions?
No, I appreciate that, Darius, and I do want to say that I appreciate you coming to us and letting us know what the reality of the situation is, and not coming to us with an already hacked apart budget. Because it's good for everybody on these boards, and also for people in the town to know what it would look like if we just did what we did last year with the students and met the IEPs. So that they know that when we get down to wherever we end up, what kind of a Herculean effort that was on the part of the school, and what that means in terms of cuts for everybody involved. At this point, I can't speak for all the boards, but from my perspective, we don't know yet what to tell you in terms of where you need to be. We're going to have to spend some time over the next couple of weeks doing some number crunching ourselves, and get an idea of how much we have to ask you to cut. I agree with your assessment that there's not really going to be a way, even with the override, to just completely absorb both budgets as they stand. It's going to be a question of what we need to do to get the town into a place that they're happy with, and the schools in a place that they can afford to operate. That wasn't really a question as much as a statement, but yeah. Anything else from the select board before I hand it over to finance committee? All right. Finance committee, do you have any questions for them about the elementary school budget?
Hi, Nathaniel. I don't really have a question per se, just being on school committee and finance committee. I do appreciate the work Darius and Shelley have done. It's amazing. This is the perfect storm as he describes it. We don't want to have devastating cuts in this beautiful school with terrific employees. So we really got to look hard at how we evaluate what we're going to do moving forward. I guess the only question I would have for Darius and Shelley would be, we got these new kids in that need special attention. How long could we have them for? And are we looking at a similar budget for next year?
So, I can't go into details about predicting how long we have them for. They are in the younger grades, so they will be in next year's budget. But once they're in the budget, your next year's budget wouldn't have to increase again because they're going to be in the budget, right? And so, and then, we may have, I don't have this number off the top of my head, but we may have current fifth grade students who receive support that may be graduating out next year. They'll be going into sixth grade and then graduating out. But those have already been factored into this year's budget, those who are leaving. You do also have students who come off, whose IEPs can be modified, and where we can, change service levels as hopefully their needs are maybe they're developing the skills and so forth, where they don't need to have some of those things. And then on the flip side, you could also have more. Sunderland does have a population, a transient population with in one side of town as well. So we see a lot, and we saw, the previous year where we had one kindergarten class, and then we had 5 students enter that kindergarten, and we had to split that class when it wasn't budgeted for. And I know we talked to you about that. So because kindergarten can't go above 25, and the state makes you split it after 25. So so we're looking at a number right now. We're sitting at 22. So we're gonna probably have to roll the dice, and if we're gonna reduce that to one section, that means we also can't take in school choice, right? So it kind of then we're losing some of the revenue there. So that we're playing that game. If you watch a school committee meeting, that's what we're talking about. That gamble of which way we go on those kind of things. So hopefully that answered your question. I start to ramble on.
No, I know, because I'm in that school committee meeting with you. And the kindergarten school choice, you have longevity. You get them in at kindergarten, you have them for the next 6 years. So I get that. Again, it's a hard position right now. I'm just trying to make sure the town understands that we got to do whatever we can to support this situation. And then the other question is, in terms of staff, I know we have a lot of senior people. Do we look at people retiring out in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and then we hire people with less experience who cost less? I mean, are there places where the budget could change in the next 2, 3 years after we get over this year?
I mean, we certainly try to capture savings with attrition when we have retirees. I don't believe that there are very many retirees in the pipeline that I'm aware of right now. Not enough that's going to make a significant impact. And as I mentioned in that last slide there, we have revolving funds that we're struggling with to continue to bring in revenues to offset the expenditures that already exist. So I think we're going to have some other challenges if there are no special ed challenges or where budget wise. I think there's going to be other things that continue to come up. Sunderland has one of the hardest budgets. You know, I don't think we're talking about going from 18% this year to a 2% increase next year by any means. I think it's going to mean that we have to look at our class sizes, our staffing, making sure that we're doing what we need to balance the fiscal responsibility while also meeting the needs of our students.
Great, thank you. Anything
Agreed.
else
So
from the financial committee? Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No, I was just going to say I agreed. I know both sides of it. I mean, there's a short term on this budget, and then we got a lot of work to do looking ahead for the future budgets and how do we best support our kids.
And I
Great,
just
thank you,
know
Joe.
the elementary school's public hearing on our budget is March 10th. So any feedback you can give us about how to shape our budget ideally would be well in advance of March 10th. I know you've got so many pieces to consider and weigh against each other, but that is our timeline that we are committed to.
I had a couple of questions if I could ask. One's a process question, I guess, and maybe this is for Shelley. I think I saw on the front of the deck that you put up, the date was February 11th on it. I don't know if that was for a meeting or just when you started or whatever, but you know, one thing that I've found hard in the couple of years I've been on this is not having any materials ahead of calls like this makes it really difficult to think through what's happening. And I know you explain a lot of it, and I appreciate that. But, you know, in the future, because I know a lot of these things, it's not you're electing to increase this or that. There's a lot of things just kind of being foisted upon you from cost increases. But I think one thing that we could do to work better together is if we had more information earlier, understanding that it's not final, at least I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, February 11th was the last school committee meeting, so that was the date of that budget draft.
Right. So we got a
did.
top line 18% increase email like yesterday or the day before with no attachments and no information. I guess I'm just curious why that stuff isn't shared if it's been completed and presented for a week or two.
All of the budget books are also on our website, which we can give Becky where that lies so that they can be found. And, you know, Darius, you and I can talk about distribution of things moving forward.
Thank you.
That'd be great. So that's a process question. Then I have one kind of budget question. You mentioned out of district costs. I know that's a big number, big increase and big number in and of itself. And I know there seems to be a tuition component and a transportation component. Could you summarize for me? And if you have to follow up, that's totally fine. What the total cost is, tuition, as well as total cost is transportation. So the full thing, what the increase is, and then how many students is that serving?
So out of district, it will be for 2 students. And the budgeted cost is $285,000 for next year. Transportation's a little bit harder to break down. We're seeing an increase on special ed transportation sort of in general. It's really difficult to find special education transportation. So that total line increase is 70,000, but that may not be related directly to just the out of districts. It's also our in-district students that we're required to transport as well. It gets lumped into one line in the budget.
So for the 2 out of district students, the cost is $285,000 plus some amount of 70,000, or 70 is the increase and it's some amount of
70
bigger
was the
number.
increase. So 150 is our total transportation cost for special education.
Okay, so it's 285 plus some percent of 150,000.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's just not tenable to spend $150,000 in a couple students, and then, that comes out of what we can invest in the other 173 students that we're trying to serve, right?
It's
Yes.
untenable, but it is mandated and required that we take care of those students' needs. So,
I didn't say it was
yeah.
voluntary. I'm agreeing with you, but like, where does
And
this
obviously
end,
you
I
can't
guess?
speak to the specific needs of those students, but is there any possibility for us to add a position within the school that covers enough of those needs to be able to prevent, or not prevent, but be able to offer the option of having the one or more of those students stay in district as opposed to going out of district? Or would we be needing to add multiple positions that would cost more than what it's costing us to send them out of district?
We at Sunderland have a program for students that have more intense needs, and the program the bandwidth of the program is only so wide. It can reach so many of the needs. In that program, we even get tuition in when we can. So, and we're doing the same thing in the other elementary schools as well, as we're trying to build the capacity. But you're exactly right. The high level, when you get to these high level needs, it's not just one position. It's multiple positions. It's space. It's and so forth. And so, we don't, obviously we don't have students go out of district lightly. Both based on it's in the best interest of a student to stay in their home school and not be put on a bus to go as far as Springfield for some of the programmings that they may need. So we see that, and it is, as Dylan, you kind of mentioned, the cost is astronomical. And I know the state is talking about it at the state level. It's hitting districts across the state, where these programs are increasing in costs, where you're talking about vans, buses that close to $300 a day. It's again, it's something that we keep an eye on, but our hands get tied when the needs, due out are larger than what our programs can do. So, building something like that in house, it's also finding the right personnel. Finding those with moderate to severe special needs background is also a very hard to find hire as well, because we do have a program similar to that up in Conway, where we can take even more intense needs students, and Sunderland has sent people to Conway for that, but right now we can't find a replacement to the teacher that retired. We're putting things together up there. It's posted if someone wants to apply, but we can't find the personnel that want to do that really hard work of these intense needs.
And I think Darius just gave some more insight there onto the transportation cost. So if you look at that $150,000, this is not, across the board, but if we're paying $300 a day, and that is sometimes they're not combined routes because students have individual needs in their transportation as well. So if we have, $300 a day at 180 days for a single student that has specialized transportation, you're over $50,000 plus any program costs if they are going out. So it is a huge portion of our budget. Even without the additional increase in the current year, it is a significant portion of our budget.
This is also a good time to remind everybody on this call and watching this call that this is a good time of year to call Joe Comerford and former Rep. Natalie Blaze office to remind them to advocate for rural aid and just changes to the formula in general. All right, that's my little commercial. All right, any more questions from Finance Committee before we move on?
I have a short question. So when the wages and the COLAs and all the kind of wage stuff that was contracted, what does that contract cover? Like, or the second year on the contract? Are we in the third year on the contract?
It's a 3-year contract, and this is the second year of it.
I just had a weird picky question. Is I didn't understand why there was 3 different COLAs, because a COLA just is cost of living, which is based on inflation, which I didn't understand why there was 3 different COLAs for different types of people.
Our COLAs and our contracts are negotiated. So there was a rate negotiated for 2 separate rates for COLA negotiated for anyone on the teacher contract. So there was a top step. So those folks are not moving up on the salary schedule any longer. Then there was a COLA negotiated for anyone not on the top step. And then there was a COLA negotiated in the separate instructional assistant contract.
Okay. I just feel like it's COLA when it's cost of living and it's just raises if it's not, which that was my kind of technical language, but because COLAs are just cost of living and not raises, but it's both is what you're saying.
Yeah, the way the contract works out, the steps are kind of
Yeah.
the raises, and the cost of living is to make sure that they're as normal cost of livings would be, to keep them from falling behind the cost of inflation and whatnot. All right, any other questions from Finance Committee before we move on? Wonderful. Any questions or comments or additions from the school committees before we move on?
We look forward to getting more feedback from you about what you would like us to aim for.
We will do so. Thank you very much. All right, I think Darius and Shelley, we're ready to move on to Frontier.
Shelley, are you going to do the truncated version of this? As we're kind of imagine heads are spinning on numbers. You can go.
That is up to Nate. I can jump to the most important components, which are strictly the assessment, or I can give you some more details on budget growth. I don't know how much time you all have and how much
From my
information.
perspective, I'd say let's jump to the numbers, and the questions will probably have you referencing back to some of the other slides if we need extra.
So I want to start by showing you this slide, which was the first iteration of the budget that was presented to school committee at the January school committee meeting. This showed a nearly $1 million increase over fiscal year 26. And I think my kids are about to walk in the door, which means my dogs are going to start barking. So I will try to move quickly. If you read the article, the primary growth factor in this was due to the insurance. We were seeing a $500,000 increase on the insurance for Frontier. Since then, school committee has committed to making some change. And we are going to move ahead with a reduced budget of $400,000 off of that. So we're looking at a 3.94% budget increase, or $523,000. We're going to use some rural aid, which hadn't previously been applied, and we are looking at $300,000 in position reductions on the ground in the building. So where does that pan out to be? Sunderland is in red. It just happens to be the color that we use to identify Sunderland within the school district. So you can see the state required contribution is up $125,000, which is based on. Sorry about that. So the state required contribution, Rick Martin talked about a little bit, where it comes into play with your enrollment, income of your residents, and then property values. The additional to fund the budget is about $96,000 increase over the prior year. And that is due to that gap in our revenues that we have coming in and the money that we need to fully fund our budget. So that growth is $222,000 over the prior year. And then school committee did talk about a capital assessment of roughly $30,000, which is for the parking lot project, which covers about 1% of what we anticipate that project cost to be. So the total growth 10%. In the assessment would be about $250,000. Darius, did you say something?
You said 1%. It's 10%.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's 10%. Yes, it's 10%. 1.1 million. Yes, you're right. 10%. So total growth of $250,000 over the prior year. And what I think I'm missing on here, I'm going to stop sharing this and go to a different slide so that you can see your total amount, because that just tells you the growth. It doesn't really tell you what your total cost is.
So while you're getting up, my first question is going to be why our piece of the extra funds to fund is larger than Deerfield's piece of that. Even with our increased enrollment, we should still have substantially less enrollment and less of a piece of that puzzle than Deerfield should have, shouldn't we?
Am I unmuted?
You are, yes.
Okay. That would make complete sense. However, it's all relative. So let me find the slide that talks about the cost
Our
sharing.
share is increasing.
Yeah, so let me show you what that looks like. Can you see that where I have Sunderland highlighted in red here for the total? So this is the cost sharing based on the regional agreement, takes into consideration a 5-year rolling enrollment, and the cost sharing only comes into play when we're talking about additional to fund the budget and capital costs. So this is not relative to the state minimum required contribution, but it's all relative. So while Deerfield has a larger population, they're seeing a decline of 38 students in that 5-year rolling enrollment average when we drop off 2021 and add in 2026. So Sunderland is the only town of our member towns seeing growth, and it's 5 students, which you wouldn't think equates to a whole lot. But when you're talking about everyone else decreasing, you can see Deerfield's going down almost 0.75%, and Sunderland's going up about 0.75%. So they're going to end up paying more of our central office cost shares and of, the total assessment. Similar scenario with the state required contribution. You can see here on this slide that Conway is down a student, Deerfield's up 8, or down 8, Sunderland's up 8, and Whately stayed the same. This number is just off because of how the Excel formula comes in. It looks like it should be -1, but it really is -2 according to the state. So based on that state formula, which takes into consideration enrollment, income, and property value, Sunderland is covering that lion's share of the minimum required contribution, which I don't think has to do with, it could have some factor of your property values changing. I don't think it has to do with resident income necessarily or wealth, but that +8 of enrollment change on that foundation formula is causing a big swing. So between these two factors, you're seeing significant growth in the amount that Sunderland has to pay proportionate to everyone else. Does that make sense, Nathaniel?
Yes, no, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So I was trying to find the slide that shows your total, and it's on a different sheet, which is why I'm not sharing at the moment.
No, I figured out why I was thinking, because I was thinking of it as our percentage of the increase as opposed to our percentage of the total, and our percentage of the total went up by enough that we absorbed most of that increase because we're taking a bigger piece of the total pie. So that makes sense. Thank you for walking me through that.
You're welcome. I don't know why I cannot find this slide right now. So I'm just going to pull it up from here. Okay, can everyone see this? So this is the assessment. It actually gives you multiple year history here. So line 56. So your total assessment would be $2,813,070. That is for the general fund, and then there would be the $28,000 on top of that for the capital project, should the capital project get moved forward. And you can see Sunderland has had some big years. I think mostly it's been attributed to enrollment fluctuations, but you're looking at 222,000 roughly for the budget assessment compared to the prior year.
Shelley, I have a question that I don't know you'll be able to answer on the wire here, but last year when we had this kind of share increase, the leftmost column of that slide, so not the one with the 96,000 where it's because of the share increase, but with the state assessment minimum contribution. One of the factors that we discovered as we went through that was some of the other towns saw some large increases in kindergarten classes, which skewed what the state thought their minimum contribution should be skewed more towards their grammar schools, and that is actually what reduced their state assessment for the Frontier budget.
Sure.
Do you know if there was any more? It was Conway in particular last year with how it went through the formula. Do you know if that's also happening again?
I don't think so. I'm gonna pull up my Chapter 70 workbook and I can see if I can try to answer
Okay.
that. I
I
can
mean,
also
I'll go through
share
it. I
with
just didn't know
you
if you had
the,
looked at that because the
yeah,
state
I didn't.
assessment is total education, then it breaks down to the different schools. So if it goes up at the elementary school, it goes down at Frontier just by the formula.
Right, right. Have you downloaded, Dylan, the workbook? If not, I can email it to you and you
No,
can.
I can grab it. I went through this last year, but thank you. If you have the link handy, you can send it around to Becky and she can share it with us. But
Sure, sounds good. I don't have the answer to your question off the top of my
no
head.
worries. Understandable.
Any other questions at this stage before Shelley continues?
So I think the only factor that could change in Frontier's budget is that health insurance. You know, we are still waiting for the trust to set it rates. So if that comes in at less than 20%, that could have a minor change. I don't think it'll be enough to have a significant reduction. Might save, you know, $20,000-$30,000 off of that assessment for you, which I know every dollar counts, but I don't think it's going to be a huge swing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Shelley, do you have the wage component of the increase broken down? I know the revised budget was like 4%. I liked how on the Sunderland one you showed kind of wage and non-wage. Do you have that breakdown for the Frontier budget?
So I can show you what that looked like in the original iteration at the $900,000 increase. We haven't actually made the decisions as to what staff positions will be cut. So it's a little bit, it would be as if we had level services. I can't give you what it looks like based on the changes because that's still in conversation. But I can share with you that original iteration. Um,
That'd be great. It's a starting point. I know all this is in flux. I appreciate that.
yeah, it's okay. Okay, so this slide shows the wage growth. This was based on the larger budget. So that original budget increase we put in at the January, which was level services. So same staffing, same programs, which was about $900,000. So we looked at wage growth, which was only 2.28%. There was no column advancement for anyone on the teacher contract, so that has a big impact because it reduces the amount of that overall increase. If this were the only thing that Frontier had to tackle, it would have a significant change in what our numbers look like. And this is typical. Usually our growth on the general fund is somewhere around $300,000. And then non-wages is really where we saw the significant change. So this next slide shows $620,000 growth, primarily related to the health insurance increase. And then we had some changes in funding sources for non-wage expenses that are netting out to about 105,000. You can see those there on the bottom of the slide. So it's really that 500,000 in the health insurance that's problematic to this budget in the current year. And unfortunately, like Tex said, we can't do anything about that. Those are hard fixed costs that we're going to have to pay for our employees. And I also don't expect there to be any savings on this if we do have $300,000 in personnel cuts, because someone that doesn't currently have insurance that's staying on could add it, which could be a huge swing for our numbers as well. But the wages were, you know, while they're significant, they're not the greater piece of that pie of growth. And this will change slightly once we determine what positions are being reduced.
Thanks. And I remember from the Sunderland deck, the wage growth was 5%. Is that how much of that increase is that because of the additional positions, or was that level and that's just the difference in wage increases with level services and not adding positions?
So it's part because of the column movement. You know, if you have 4 staff that are receiving a 10% raise and they're on the top of that salary schedule and moving to the highest column, you could see significant, you know, you're talking $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 per employee. But it also depends on, so first of all, the Frontier contract is not the same as the elementary school contract. So we can't really
Right.
compare apples to apples when we're talking about staff. And with that, it really depends on where people fall on the salary schedule. So it could be that Sunderland has more, what is the word I'm trying to say? I'm having a brain blank. More veteran teachers than Frontier, which I don't necessarily think is the case, but it's just how it all plays out. It also depends on where teachers are paid from. So Frontier has different revolving pots of money that they can access that the elementary school does not have. Trying to figure out where that is on here. Might not be in this one. It's not. It's in a different iteration. I'm sorry. So Frontier has more access to grants and revolving funds than Sunderland Elementary School does. So Frontier may be supplementing more of its salaries and wages than Sunderland is with external funding sources. So there's a lot of different factors. I don't really think you could compare them. They're not apples to apples in budgets or contracts or staff composition. They also negotiate entirely separately. They ended up with the same COLAs in the new contract, but in the past, that hasn't always necessarily been the case.
Any more questions for Shelley and Darius at this point? I don't think we have any more questions. Wonderful. All right, so we all have a lot of thinking to do. We will be meeting obviously the next 2 Mondays. In 2 weeks from today, the finance committee will be meeting with us also. That's the day before y'all's public hearing for the on the 10th. That'll be the 9th. And so we will try our absolute best to have some guidance to you by then at the latest, hopefully before then. We are going to move as fast as we can. Any other final questions for any of our guests before we move on to the next part of our meeting? Thank you all so much for all the work you do. As I said with Mr. Martin, we really appreciate how hard you work to not only safeguard our children, but also the fiscal responsibility that we all share for our town's budgets. So we know it's hard. And I know it's not easy to come to a town and give us news like you did tonight. So we appreciate that as well. And we will talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
School committee, would you like to adjourn? I'm gonna stay and Joe is gonna stay, but Megan, and Amanda wasn't here. Who else? Luai, do either of you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn school committee.
I second the motion.
All in favor, Jessica, yes. Megan,
Yes.
Luai,
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Similarly, does the finance committee want to adjourn?
Yes, again.
I just wondered, not that I want to volunteer to go to more meetings, but given that this budget might need more discussion in the select board, and the next time the select board and the finance meet together isn't until the day, we can't really give that much feedback to the town whether or not it made sense to have some part of the select board's meeting next week also include the finance committee, or whether you know what I mean?
Becky, how's our meeting next week look in terms of how much we have on our docket? Do we have room to be able to make it a joint meeting?
Yes, I think yes.
Okay. So if the finance committee is amenable to doing so, we would love to have you come and give us a chance to have no
I feel like I
presentations,
saw
but
Ally
conversation.
Yes.
Ian,
I think that's a great suggestion. This has been a lot of information and really overwhelming, and there's a lot of really big decisions that need to be talked about and made, and to do it on the 9th, I don't think gives it enough time.
Yeah. And that also gives us a chance where we don't have people coming in to present, where we can really have just the nitty-gritty conversations. And so, all right. So it sounds like what we're saying
Becky
is next
will
week.
post another meeting for next Monday night, right?
Yep.
So
Thank you.
So we'll plan on having next week and the following week be our joint meetings, and hopefully between those two meetings we can get some clarity as to what our path forward is for coming up with a balanced budget. Wonderful. On that note, Val, would you like to
I'm
adjourn?
looking for a motion to adjourn the finance committee.
So moved.
Motion. Oh,
Second, Ally, right?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you all, everybody. See you
Thank
next
you
Monday.
both of
See
your
you. Thank you.
both of you all for joining us. That is it for our new business tonight. We're going to move over to old business for our normal select board meeting. First up is select board updates. Dan, do you have anything for us tonight?
I do not.
All right. Crystal, do you have anything? Well, you're on mute, but you're shaking your head, so I'm going to call that no, you don't have anything.
I'm good, thank you.
Alrighty. One update, myself and Becky went over this week to Bub's Barbecue to post a cease and desist order due to their lack of licenses to be able to be currently open. And then went over again on Friday to repost that because it was taken down. And at that time we shut the restaurant down and had the patrons leave. Just want to let you all know that in case you were not fully in the loop on that one. But that is all I have. Becky, anything you want to add on that one?
I'll just say the good news was we didn't have to put another sign up on Saturday.
Absolutely. That is great news. All right, that is it for select board updates. Becky, do you have any town administrator updates for us?
I just wanted the rest of the board to know that tonight we were going to meet with the farmer and the neighbor involved in the greenhouses, but we've rescheduled that hopefully for next week because of the snow today. But we will follow up on that.
That makes sense. Great. All right, is that it for you for town administrator updates?
Yes.
All righty. Next up, public comment. Do we have anyone who's in the meeting who hasn't had an opportunity to speak who would like to take a minute or two to do so?
Jennifer, Uncle's here. I wondering when a vote on a new APR parcel can join the docket, if that's
It will be on the 2nd, this
Okay.
coming week.
okay. I'll be there.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. All right, any other public comment before we move on? All right, not hearing any more. We have no executive session tonight, no correspondence. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, roll call vote. Aye, Nathaniel Waring.
Aye, Crystal Drake Tremblay.
Hi, Dan Murphy.
All right. 3-0. The time is 8:23. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you sticking around for the long meeting, and we will talk to you all soon.